this is Jean from Happy Indulgence, and it is now September, which I'm super surprised about. It's not long until I go to my holidays on Europe. I'm leaving next week, until the Brisbane Writers Festival next week as well, and until the baby comes. So I can't believe there's so many things happening. I better enjoy the time while it lasts. So basically this month was super exciting. We found out the gender of the baby and it's going to be a girl. We're so excited because that's kind of, I think, what we wanted, and yeah, like we can't wait. We've been thinking of names, looking at baby things to get, but obviously all that is put on hold until we get back from our holiday in the UK and Europe. So I think we're leaving next Sunday, so I'm going to be scheduling some videos to go up once a week, but I'll pretty much be taking a hiatus from the rest of my social medias. So we're going to London, Paris, Italy, so we're going to Venice, Florence and Rome, and we'll be off for 3 weeks. So I'm really excited. Make sure to check out my social media to keep up to date with the holiday plans. Anyway, onto the books that I read during August. It was actually a really good reading month, and I think that's because of Booktubeathon. I'll make sure to leave a link to my vlog of the Booktubeathon as well. So I never really did a wrap up of it, but you can kind of see how I went. So as always with my wrap ups, I'll be going from the books that I love the most to the books that I love the least. So yeah, let's just get started. So starting with Graevale by Lynette Noni, this was a definite 5-star read for me. I love this series. It's just gotten more and more complex since the first book, which is Akane, and this is the 4th book in the series of the Midorian Chronicles. It's a love OzYA series that is super popular. It's about a girl being swept up in a different world and learning how to fight this rebel prince called Avon. He's super evil, and yeah, like I don't want to go too much into the series, but this was a really tough book for Alex. It was really emotional because she had to learn to face rejection, and that was really hard. And also she's undergoing a lot of her training and she's trying to re-establish boundaries with people. It's really interesting, and there's like a really emotional death at the end of the book as well. So yeah, obviously I gave this one 5 stars. Next was my reread of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and I actually reread this one in the illustrated edition, but it's too heavy and it's on my shelf somewhere, so I didn't want to go grab it. But it's been a long time since I've actually read the series or reread the series. I think it was a couple of years ago when I reread the first book. It was a really great reread. It's just so comforting to go back into Harry Potter. In preparation for my trip to London, I also watched the first 4 movies as well, which I absolutely loved. I'll keep on going and hopefully I'll finish before the end of the trip. But yes, obviously I love this. It's a 5 stars. If you haven't read Harry Potter yet, what are you waiting for? Next one is The Loneliest Girl in the Universe by Lauren James. This was such a surprise, guys. It's a really unexpected favorite. I actually picked up this one upon a recommendation from one of my friends. For those of you picking up this book thinking it's going to be a sci-fi romance, you're going to be so surprised towards the end of the book, and that's what I was as well. What I'll basically call this is a sci-fi book with a thriller twist to it, and I loved it. It's just so readable. It's about a girl who's brought up in a spaceship and that's all she's ever known, but there's a guy coming towards her to join her in her expedition, and obviously it's a lot of anticipation, a lot of chatting with him, getting to know him, but yeah, things definitely take a turn. It's so unexpected, and I read this in one sitting because I was just so into it, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Next book I read is After the Lights Go Out by Lili Wilkinson, and this is a love OzYA thriller. It's basically like a really gripping survival story about what happens when all the lights get shut off in the town. There's no electricity, there's no cars. Prue and her 2 sisters have been trained by their survivalist father to survive instances like this and to survive the apocalypse, and there's a bunker that they've learned to live in. It's stocked up with supplies, but then it's about the questions of morality, where like what happens when the townspeople are looking for food? What happens when they're starving? Do you look out for your own, or do you go and help them, which will deplete your supplies? Things like that. Like, it was such an interesting book. I I've read a lot of Australiana dystopians and I've actually really liked all of them. There's Tomorrow When the War Began, there's The Sky So Heavy by Claire Zorn that I really loved, and this one was definitely unexpected because it didn't take a turn like I thought it would. I really liked following Prue, who was a really smart and intelligent protagonist as well, but you could just see the people around her just descending into madness and the things that were happening. Like, this is a book that can actually happen, and that's what's really scary. It was really interesting, and I gave this one 4 stars. Next book is The Star Touch Stories by Roshani Chokshi, and if you guys have seen my top 5 favorite diverse fantasy books, you'll know both The Star Touch Queen and A Crown of Wishes is on my list. So definitely The Star Touch Stories follows on with 3 short stories about the characters that we know and love, and I absolutely loved it as usual. I really loved how the 2 last books focus on Gowrie and Vikram from A Crown of Wishes because I loved that book. I love both of the characters and the banter. This book had really great mythology as well. It's written in such a lyrical and beautiful way, as we've come to expect, but it just like continues on with the story. The first one is great as well. It more fills in some of the backstory from A Star Touch Queen, which I really loved as well. Definitely have to pick this up if you have read A Star Touch Queen and A Crown of Wishes. It's not recommended if you haven't read either of them, but I really loved it because I love both of those books too. And if you haven't read them, definitely pick them up. So I gave this one 4 stars. Next book is actually a reread for me, and I read The Raven Boys 3 years ago and I don't remember much about it, so I thought it was due for a reread because I haven't continued on with The Dream Thieves. As you might be seeing in the books on my TBR that I need to read video, which I'll make sure to link. But yeah, like before delving into The Dream Thieves, I really wanted to reread The Raven Boys, mainly because I didn't remember much about it, and I surprisingly love the audiobook as well. So originally this was a book that I read and I was like, yeah, it's pretty interesting, it's pretty mysterious, I can see why people love it, but I wasn't too hyped up to read the sequel. But after reading this now, I mean, it's such a strange and mysterious book about ley line hunting, about Welsh gods. There's a ghost in there and fortune telling as well. Like, it's just such a different book, and Maggie writes in such a beautiful and lyrical manner. It is a bit slow going, but it's more about the character development and this unusual psychic world. So I have continued on with The Dream Thieves now in audiobook format, and I'm really loving it so far. I hope I get to finish the rest of the series because I'm loving it. So this one I gave 4 stars originally and 4 stars upon my reread. Restoration by Angela Slatter, and I actually read this one as part of the blog tour. This is the 3rd book in the Verity Fastbinder series. I don't want to go too much into it because it is the 3rd book in the series, but this follows on with a really smart and snarky protagonist who's Verity. She's like really street smart, but she's also like a half fae, half human, and she deals with a lot of prejudice in the fae world. And it's also set in my city of Brisbane, which is awesome because I recognize all the landmarks and things like that. So I've actually got a blog post about why you should read this series. I'll link it down below as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed this installment. It's just like a complex paranormal investigation story about angels that's really dark and gritty as well. It kind of reminds me of like Angel, the TV series back in the day by Joss Whedon, and yeah, I really enjoyed it and gave this one 4 stars. Next one I read is also a companion novel and the 3rd book in the series, and that is Record of a Spaceborn View by Becky Chambers. And I think this might be my favorite out of the series so far, or my 2nd favorite in the series. The first book is The Long Way to a Small and Angry Planet, which I absolutely loved. The 2nd book is A Close and Common Orbit, which was a bit of a companion, and this one again as well. Like, it does mention some of the previous characters, but they can pretty much be read as a standalone. And what I love about this series, it's such a thinking book. Like, it's a retrospective space opera series just about the way of life of people living on an Exodus fleet. and basically you learn about these different species and how they get to know each other, how they converse, how they learn about each other's differences, not only in their physiology but the way they live and the way they interact. And I think that's a really beautiful way of exploring diversity and acceptance. There's a lesbian couple in here as well. This one actually noticeably focuses on humans a lot more than the previous books, but humans from different stages of life, and you find out about their wants and their wishes and living on a planet colony pretty much, but how a lot of the things that they experience are pretty much what we experience on Earth. It just really brings together like what it means to be human and humankind as well. So I love this series because it's so smart. It's like a slow thinking book. This one I gave 4 stars to. Next one was actually a bit of a surprise, and that one is Grace and Fury by Tracy Banghart. This is the ARC edition. Reading the blurb at the back of the book, I expected this to be your typical YA fantasy book about 2 sisters. But it actually didn't turn out to be that way. One of the sisters has been picked to be the Princess Grace, and the other sister has been thrown to a prison island. There was something so feminist about this book, even though it's about like a prince who controls his different graces and surrounds himself with beautiful women that he can control. Like when I read that blurb, I was like, oh yeah, you know what to expect. It's gonna be kind of like anti-feminist and stuff like that. But it actually wasn't that way at all. And I found it like to be a really strong story about sisterhood, about finding one's own power, and just the power of friendship and the power of family as well. And I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. It was so unexpected and I really liked it. Next one is The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken, and I actually listened to this on audiobook. I mean, you guys know about The Darkest Minds, right? Like it's basically about a group of teenagers who have superpowers, and then what the government has done is segregated them from the adult humans, and a lot of the children have died off, the ones who didn't get superpowers. So it's basically about adults versus teens or children. But then there's one girl called Rupi who manages to escape the prison camp or whatever it is, and then she finds others like herself in different camps and learns how to survive. So I really wanted to read this in preparation for the Darkest Minds movie, but then after reading this one, I just was not impressed at all. It was just so slow. I mean, I've read a lot of dystopians and this one was so mediocre. There was like barely any action. Most of the book is set in a car, like driving to a different camp, and I just wasn't into it because I thought Ruby was kind of a passive character and she's pretty weak at the start. She does evolve into a stronger character towards the end of the book, but it felt like things were happening to her and she just kept on like internal monologuing just how weak she was. While reading it, I was just thinking, if all these kids have all these superpowers, like X-Men like powers, how could the government keep them locked up, and why would they lock them up for no apparent reason other than to be slaves? Anyway, so I thought there were a lot of gaps in the world building. It was really slow. I just wasn't interested in the characters or the main character either. So I ended up giving The Darkest Minds 2 stars, and I'm not keen on watching the movie anymore, sadly. Next book I read is The Path of the Lost by Beau Kondos, and this is a Love Oz YA fantasy, which is really great to see, and it's about a world called the Cosm where creative expression is outlawed. So people can't dance, they can't sing, they can't do artwork. There is a girl called Cynthia and she can actually paint and draw and do artwork, and it's called delving, and then she brings a guy from Melbourne into the world of the Cosm, and then they learn about the path of the lost. Reading this, I thought it was really interesting and unique with how the world was set up of the Cosm with all this creativity outlawed, but then I wasn't really interested in any of the characters. I mean, you've got a rebel, you've got Cynthia, you've got the guy from our world, and then you've got a guardian, and you sort of learn about each and every one of them them from each of their perspectives, but I didn't find them that different at all. Overall, I thought it was written in a really great way. It had an interesting concept, but the characters weren't that interesting, and there really wasn't a strong plot as well, so I got really bored at times because I found it slow and draggy. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. So I read Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by J.K. Rowling, and this was for the Booktubeathon challenge, and basically I read this first in this small paperback edition, so it's got a few illustrations in there, and then I reread it on my large illustrated hardback edition. Basically, I enjoyed the hardback read a lot more because each and every page and each and every creature is illustrated, which is wonderful. And that's what I found missing in this edition because there's only a few illustrations. And I think what really brings the creatures and the world to life are the illustrations, because there's some wonderful descriptions of these magical creatures, but seeing them makes a whole world of difference. So I think I ended up giving this edition 3 stars, but I gave the illustrated one 5 stars. Last book of the month is Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, and I read this one for Booktubeathon as well. Basically, I don't get it, guys. Like, so many people love the poetry and the story that this book tells, and it's basically viewing it as a collection from start to finish rather than the poems individually. I can see how, like, it's about a woman's journey, about emotion, about strength, about loss, and then about understanding herself, but some of these poems are just a couple of words long, and, you know, yeah, I didn't really get it. And there were also surprisingly a lot of mentions about between a woman's legs, and that was surprising as well, so I ended up giving this one 2 stars. So those are all the books that I read during the month of August. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you end up picking up any of these books, let me know in the comments down below. Give me a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks guys, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.